Chazal say that there's nothing which is not alluded to in the Torah. And undoubtedly there are hints to Chanukah in the Torah, and many look for hints in the parashiyos that deal with Yosef, because these are always read at Chanukah time. In past years, we've discussed that the story of Dinah, back in Parshas Vayishlach, really corresponds to the story of Chanukah. But there's another story in the Chumash that I think is a very, very open, more than a remez. It's really the entire telling of the Chanukah story, which is back in Parshas Lech Lecha. Back in Parshas Lech Lecha, we have the war of the kings, the 4 kings against the 5 kings. And the parsha begins that it was in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Eliezer, Kedar La'omer, the king of Elam, Sidol, the king of Goyim. So these 4 kings waged war against the 5 kings of the Kikar Hayarden, the 5 kings of the small towns on the Jordan plain, the kings of Stone, Amorah, Admah, Savoyim, and the king of Bela, which is also known as Soar. And the Torah in great detail describes the war, how for 12 years the 5 kings were enslaved to the 4. Then in the 13th year, the 4 began a series of conquests over a wider area, and the 5 rebelled. And in that war, Lot was taken captive by the 4 kings, and Avraham Avinu entered the battle, and he decisively defeated the 4 kings. And this is a story which the Torah talks about at length. And the Ramban points out that these 4 kings, and Avraham Avinu's defeated the 4 kings, is a remez to the Arba Malchias, the 4 kingdoms that would ultimately enslave Klal Yisrael. And Avram's victory is a remez to the victory that Mashiach will achieve over the Malchias. So the Ramban explains the correspondence. This is based on the Medrash, but it's very interesting to note that the Medrash that we have has a different girsa than the Ramban's girsa. If you open the Medrash Rabbah, look in the Medrash Rabbah, it goes like this. That Amraphel, the king of Shinar, that corresponds to Babel. Shinar, of course, is Babel. Arioch melech Eliezer, Arioch, the king of Eliezer, that, says the Medrash as we have it, is Yavam. That's Yavam. Kedar La'omer melech Elam, that is Madai. That is Persia, Parasu Madai. And the Sidol melech Goyim, that's a reference to Edom, to Rome. That's the girsa that we have in the Medrash. And if so, the Malchias are not listed in chronological order, because according to this girsa of the Medrash, the order is Bavel, Yavan, Madai, and Edom. Now the Ramban and Rabbeinu Bechaya have different girsa in the Medrash. They understand that Amraphel Melech Shinar is Bavel, Arioch Melech Eliezer is Madai, Kedar La'omer Melech Elam is Yavam. Even though Elam, we know from the book of Daniel, that Elam was a city in Persia, but the Gemara of Eliezer and Daf Yud says that when the Greeks conquered the Persians, the first place they conquered was the city of Elam, and from there they spread their dominion. And therefore Elam could be a reference to Greece, to Yavan, as well as to Persia. And this is the girsa that the Ramban and Rabbeinu Bechaya have. The Kedar La'omer melech Elam is a reference to Yavan, and Sidol melech Goyim again is Edom and Rome. So this girsa seems to follow the chronological order. It's placing Yavan in 3rd place, and that's Kedar La'omer melech Elam. So Kedar La'omer is the king of Yavan. Now it's interesting, and go ahead in the Parsha, we find an amazing thing, that although they're listed on Amraphel, Arioch, But as the Torah recounts the events, it seems that Kedar La'omer is first and foremost. Shtein Esvei Shana Avdus Kedar La'omer. For 12 years, the 5 kings served Kedar La'omer, even though Kedar La'omer is only one of 4. Then it says, in the 14th year came Kedar La'omer and the kings that were with him, and they began conquering a wider area. Later, in the Pasuk Tes, when the kings are again listed, all 4 are listed, but Kedar La'omer is put first. So Rashi explains, Lefi Shuhu Haya Bal Hamase Nichnas Ba'evi Akayra. Since Kedar La'omer was the central figure, that's why he is mentioned apart from the others. So although we have a confederation of 4 kings, but really in this story, first and foremost is Kedar La'omer. And according to the Girsa of the Ramban and Rabbeinu Bechaya, Kedar La'omer corresponds to Yavan. So it seems that here we have the conquest of Eretz Yisrael by Kedar La'omer. Corresponds to the conquest of Yavan and their attempt to establish dominion over Eretz Yisrael. So when Avraham Avinu defeats the Malachim, this really is the victory of Yisrael over Yavam. That's what it seems. And therefore this story really is the story of Chanuka. Now the truth is that we know from the Al-Hanisim some amazing things about the story of Chanuka, that the military victory of Chanuka involved a victory of Rabbim biad ma'atim, many were given over to the few, and Giborim biad chalashim, strong into the hands of the weak, Tmeim biad tahirim, the pure into the hands of the pure, Rishayim biad tzadikim, V'zeidim biad oskei sarosecha. Now the 2 things we know about Avraham Avinu's army in this battle was, first of all, they were Talmidei Chachamim. The pasuk says, "Vayarek es chanichav." He armed his students. So we know they were Talmidei Chachamim, they were tzadikim, they were tahirim, they were oskei sarosecha. And the other thing we know about them is that there were very few, because it says in the pasuk that all together he mustered up 318 people. And Rashi brings 2 pshatim. One pshat is Kipshuta. The other pshat is that it really refers to one person, Eliezer, the gematria of his name being 318. So either way, we're talking about very few people against the armies of 4 kings. So even if it's 318 people, it's overwhelming odds, and especially if it's just one person whose name the gematria is 318, it's Rabbim biad ma'atim, and it's certainly Rishayim biad tzadikim, Zayim biad oskei sarosecha. So this victory exactly corresponds to the story of Chanuka. It's even more than that. Of all the battles that Klal Yisrael fought, it seems that the battle against Yavan is the first ideological battle. Whereas the interest of Bavel, for example, seems to have been strategic. Eretz Yisrael was at a crossroads, a very strategic place between Egypt in the southwest and Bavel in the northeast. So naturally, as a crossroads, it would have been to a country's strategic advantage to have a foothold in Eretz Yisrael. We don't see that Bavel had any religious issues with the Jewish people. If you study the story, it doesn't seem that there's any ideological issue involved in the conflict between Bavel and Yisrael. We talk about the conflict of Paras and Mada against Yisrael. It seems that really Paras was quite supportive. Kairash gave the permission to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. He was very supportive. He even gave provisions for that. We're really talking about the Gezeira of Haman. And the Gezeira of Haman also, it doesn't seem is really a ideological issue. It almost seems a personal vendetta against Mordechai. And those earlier conflicts don't appear to be ideological. Yavan appears to be so. Because Yavan, as is described in the Svarim, there seems to be the issues that were being contested were religious issues, philosophical issues. Hellenist values versus Jewish values. And this war, interestingly enough, the Zohar says, was also a religious war. That this entire war, you think there's a war of 4 kings against 5 kings, you think that it's a geopolitical struggle. The entire war, the instigation of the war by the 4 kings, was only to capture Avram. And the Zohar says, in Parshas Lech Lecha, that they really made a mistake. Because Lot looked exactly like Avram. He was the exact replica of Avram in terms of physical appearance. And Lot lived in Stone. So the 4 kings figured that if we conquer Stone and the surrounding areas, we'll be able to take hold of Avram Avinu. Little did they realize it wasn't Avram, really was Avram's nephew. But when they realized their mistake, they figured it's just as good. Because if we have Lot captive, undoubtedly Avram will come to his defense. Sooner or later we'll get Avram as well. The issue they had with Avram was undoubtedly a religious issue. It doesn't seem to be that they were threatened by Avram. He was a single individual. But undoubtedly it was religious. And this wasn't the first time that Avram was embroiled in a religious conflict. If you go back to Parshas Noach, the Dor Haflaga, so it says the entire world was Devarim Achadim. The entire world was single-minded, Devarim Achadim. So the Medrash Rabbah says that they were coming to fight Avraham Avinu. They were coming to fight, first of all, Hashem, who is called Echad, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And they're coming to fight Avram, about whom the pasuk says, Echad Haya Avram. So Devarim Achadim means they were coming to contest those who were Echad. So whatever is going on, it seems that these 4 kings have a certain ideology, and therefore they're not interested in the 5 kings at all. They're only interested in capturing Avram and once and for all putting his ideology to rest. So we're dealing with a religious war, which is exactly the Chanuka story. And therefore this episode doesn't correspond to the earlier episodes of Israel in conflict with Bavel or with Paras and Modai. It really corresponds exactly to the story of Yavan and Yisrael. Now, undoubtedly, if we learn the story carefully, we'll see that there are many other hints to aspects of the Chanuka story in this story. I'd like to share 3, if time permits. 3 different ideas that emerge from this story of Avram, which relate to the Chanuka story. One of the interesting aspects of the Chanuka story is the idea that it revolves around Kaihanim. The victory, the battle, was led by Kaihanim. This is something we emphasize in the Haneras Halalah, which we say at the lighting of the Menorah, Al Yidei Kaihanecha HaKadoshim, that the battle was conducted and the victory was achieved via the Kaihanim. And it's a very interesting thing. Normally Kaihanim don't wage war. Here it seems that the Kaihanim were at the forefront. And it's not b'mikra. It isn't by chance. It isn't just b'makam she'ein ish, no one else was available, so the Kaihanim stepped in. It seems there's a remez in Parshas of Zayis HaBracha that this conflict is specifically related to Kaihanim, that Yavan in some way are misnaged to Kaihanim more than to anyone else. Because it says in the bracha of Levi, it says, Mechatz Mosnayim Kamov, that Moshe Rabbeinu prays that the Ribono Shel Olam should strike those who rise up against Shevet Levi in the thighs. In other words, with a blow that will knock them off their feet. Mechatz Mosnayim Kamov. So Rashi in that pasuk brings 2 pshatim. One pshat is that it refers to Ma'arim ala Kahuna. It refers to people who contest the legitimacy of Kahuna, who claim that the Kehanim have no right, just like Kairach did. Right? Kairach said, Kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim, why should we have Kehanim? So if subsequently there'll be again people who are ma'arir, who contest the Kahuna, so Mechatz Masnayim Kamel, the Kadosh Baruch Hu should give them a blow that will knock them over. That's one pshat. And the second pshat Rashi says is a reference to the Mulchama of the Chashmonaim. that Moshe Rabbeinu foresaw Ruach HaKodesh that there would be a battle against the Yevonim, and Moshe Rabbeinu prayed in that battle Nachat Mosnaim Kamov, to smite those who rise up against the Kehanim, which seems to turn the whole thing on its ear, because when we think of the Chanukah story, we think of the Kehanim rising up against the Yevonim. And we wouldn't say that the Yevonim were coming to rise up against the Kehanim. But that's what the pasuk says, Machatz Mosnaim Kamov. You should smite in the thighs those who rise up against Shevet Levi. So the implication is that the war of the Yevonim was, in some sense, not just that Shevet Levi, the Kehanim, responded to the threat of Yavon, but in some way, Yavon's attack was an attack against the Kehanim, which is peculiar. We know there were gezeiros that Yavon made against observing the Torah, observing mitzvahs, Chodesh, Shabbos, Mila. We don't find there were any specific gezeiros against Kehanim. So what is this idea that the Yevonim are called Kamov, those who rise against Kehanim? It must be that in the ideology of this conflict, somehow the tension between Yavon and the Kehanim is more intense, more acute than between Yavon and the rest of Klal Yisrael. What's interesting to note is that Kahuna also plays a very central role in this story of the War of the Kings. Because we know that in the aftermath of the War of the Kings, as we know, Chazal tell us, the pasuk tells us, that Avram came to Emek Shaveh, which is Emek HaMelech. And at that point, he was greeted by Malki Tzedek, Melech Shalem, Malki Tzedek, the king of Shalem. And Chazal say, Ramban quotes, that Shalem is Yerushalayim. Vihi b'Shalem Sukkah. Shalem is Yerushalayim. Malki Tzedek, Chazal say, was Shem, the son of Noach, Rashi quotes, and he was the king of Yerushalayim. And it seems that Yerushalayim was either in or adjacent to this Emek HaMelech. The Malbim in the Parsha says that Emek HaMelech was a valley that was near Yerushalayim. And only the Malbim, with this fantastic ability to have the whole entire Tanakh in front of him, points out that the place where Avshalom made his monument, which today is adjacent to Yerushalayim, is called Emek HaMelech. So therefore he noticed that this is in fact the case. But Al Kaponim, it says that Malki Tzedek comes out to greet him. And when Malki Tzedek greets Avram, first he says a bracha to Avram. He says, Baruch Avram, blessed is Avram, lekel elyon konei shemaim va'aretz, ubaruch kel elyon asher migein tzarecha b'yodecha. Blessed is Hashem who handed over your enemies. So the Gemara says in the Darim that Avram corrected him, that you don't give a bracha to a human before you give a bracha to the Ribono Shel Olam. And the Gemara says there in the Darim, the Lamed Beis, that really bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahotzi kahuna mishem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted that the Kehanim should emerge from shame. But when Malki Tzedek made this mistake, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu transferred the kahuna and he gave it over to the seed of Avram. And the Mefarshim explain, although Avram also is Mizer Hashem, but the point is, Avram does not have the kahuna because he inherited it from Shem. He has it in its own right, meaning Shem lost the kahuna. So Avram's claim to kahuna is not because he is Mizer Hashem. His claim to kahuna is in its own right. It was taken away from Shem and was given to Avram. And the Gemara brings the pasuk in Tehillim that says, Ata kayin la'olam, you are the kayin forever, al divrasi Malki Tzedek, because of the word of Malki Tzedek, because of that mistaken word that he made. So it seems an amazing thing that the consequence of this conversation that took place after the battle is that Avram was zeicha to kahuna. So we see that kahuna features in this story as well, just as it does in the Chanuka story. Let's try to understand exactly what the idea of kahuna here is, and exactly how this relates to Shem's losing the kahuna and Avram's getting it. Let's digress for a moment and talk about a general Chanuka theme. There's a famous question Maharal asks in the Chedushei Agados of Masechah Shabbos. It's probably one of the most well-known words of the Maharal. That there's an apparent contradiction in emphasis when it comes to the Chanukah story. That in the Tefillah of Al Hanisim, which the Chazal were masakin to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so the emphasis is on the military victory, the victory of Yisrael over Yavon, the Rabbim B'yad Ma'atim, and the Gibor B'yad Chalashim, and so on and so forth. And the nace of the Shemen, that the oil lasted for 8 days, is not mentioned at all. Not at all. And yet, the whole emphasis in the Gemara is on the Neis HaShemen. This is why Chazal were masakin the mitzvah of lighting the Neiros Chanukah. So how do we explain that? How do we explain the fact that in the Tefillah, one point is emphasized, and in the Gemara and in the Takana of Ner Chanukah, the other point is emphasized? So the Maharal says like this. He says, really, in the sense that Chanukah is a time for thanksgiving, really we're only giving thanks for the military victory over Yavon. The nace of the Shemen was in a sense an unnecessary miracle. Why? Because whenever you figure out whether something was necessary or important, you have to ask yourself, what would the alternative have been? What would have happened had the miracle not occurred? So what happened was that they wouldn't have done the mitzvah, which is disappointing, but it's not a cataclysm. As we could have lived. Very often we find ourselves in situations where, because of circumstances beyond our control, we can't do a mitzvah. A person is in jail, and he can't get a pair of tefillin, he can't get a lulav, can't get a shofar, so he'll model the mitzvah. So, to establish a day of thanksgiving because we were enabled to perform a mitzvah isn't likely. The Maharal doesn't mention this, but Befrat, especially, the way the Achreinim understand, that had they not had the miracle, and they only would have had oil that was tamei, they really could have used that. Because the halach is tumah hutru b'tzibur, the laws of tumah are suspended when it comes to the public offerings. So they would have been allowed to use oil that was tamei for the menorah. So it comes out the miracle wasn't to enable the mitzvah to be done. The mitzvah would have been done in any case. It was only to enable the mitzvah to be done behidur, to be done in the best possible way, b'tahara. And that's what the Beis Levi says. Beis Levi says that the reason Chazal were masakin all sorts of hidurim when it comes to Chanukah, that you have Mahadrin and Mahadrin min Mahadrin, is because since the whole miracle of Chanukah was to enable the performance of a mitzvah behidur, so therefore Chazal were masakin hidurim. But it comes out that to establish Chanukah as day of thanksgiving for the Neis HaShemen wouldn't make any sense. So the Haidah really is for the Neis HaMulchama, the victory in battle, and therefore in Shmoneh Esrei, in Al Hanisim, which is the Nusach that Chazal established for Haidah, for giving thanks, that's the only thing which is emphasized. So why did Hashem make this miracle B'chlal? So says the Maharal, it's because we would have come to a mistake. We would have made an error. What would the mistake have been? We would have thought, well, since the battle seems to have been a natural victory, and maybe at the time one would have not jumped to that conclusion, but certainly after some time passes, we certainly would say, well, they had superior strategy and better trained soldiers, and the Greeks relied on mercenaries. All sorts of cheshbonos you can introduce to rationalize how the Jews were victorious. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make it clear to us. You should know that this victory was a neis min hashamayim. It was a miracle, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu made an accompanying miracle, which is undeniable. Now, that oil that is enough to last one night should last for 8 nights. That is certainly something which is a neis l'malam derech hateva. That serves as a reminder that God is involved in this entire affair. Don't write it off as something natural. But really, the Iker, says the Maharal, is neis hamulchama. This is a very, very famous thought of the Maharal. The truth is, you take it even a step further. There's a famous kasha, another famous Chanukah Darchei, famous Beis Yosef's kasha. Beis Yosef asks, why is Chanukah 8 days? If the oil would have lasted 1 day anyway, so the miracle really was only 7 days. So why should we have Hanukkah 8 days? So there are many, many tirutzim to this question. There are svarim that report dozens and dozens of tirutzim. There's even one sefer which has 100 tirutzim I've heard of. But one of the answers which is given to this question is this: that the whole purpose of the miracle of Chanuka, as Maharal explains, is that we should understand even those things that appear to be natural are really a function of the Ratzon Hashem. And therefore, it's important that we understand that even the fact that oil burns naturally is really a manifestation of Ratzon Hashem. So therefore, that's why we have to light the menorah all 8 nights. If we light only 7, that would be as if to say, the 7 days are noteworthy. That's because Hashem made a miracle. The fact that it burnt 1 day, that would have happened anyway. That's Teva. But the idea is that even Teva is really a manifestation of Ratzon Hashem, and therefore we have to celebrate that too. And that's why we light all 8 nights. And the truth is that Rabbi Tzadok HaKayin writes that this is a very central theme when it comes to Chanukah. He points out a very interesting thing in the Nusach Al Anisim. The Nusach Al Anisim of Purim, it says, B'mei Mordechai v'Esther. The heroes are referred to by their first names. When it comes to Chanukah, it says, B'mei Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kayin Gadol. So we report the father of Matisyahu, Matisyahu ben Yochanan. So why is it necessary? No, when it comes to Purim, we don't say Mordechai ben Yoyer or Esther bas Avichayil. So why here do we say Matisyahu ben Yochanan? So Rabbi Tzadok says an amazing thing. There's a Gemara in Tainus which says like this. After the Gemara tells many stories of Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, the great tzaddik, so the Gemara says, Amar Rav, B'chol Yayim, every day, a baskoil emerges from Har Chorev and says that Kol ha'olam kulay nizayim b'shvil Chanina b'ni, that the entire world is sustained in the merit of Chanina, my son, the Chanina b'ni, dailo b'kav churva me'erev Shabbos l'erev Shabbos. And he himself suffices a cab, which is a small measure of carob, for the entire week. So what the Gemara is saying is that Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa was such a great person, such a big tzaddik, the whole world is sustained in his chus, and he himself suffices with very little. So Rabbi Tzadok asks the historical question. This statement is quoted in Rav's name. When Rav lived, Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa was long gone. He was from the early Tanoim. Rav was already from the earliest of the Amoraim. So what could Rav mean when he says, in his own time, that every day a Baskoil says the world is sustained in the schus of Chanina, my son? So it says Rabbi Tzadok that it isn't a reference to Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa. It means something else entirely. It means that in every generation there is a tzaddik who recognizes that everything really is a gift from the Ribono Shel Olam. Nothing is there simply because the laws of nature dictate that it be so. Everything that we have is a gift. That's Chanina. Chanina is miloshain giving, granting. And most people in the world don't recognize that. Most people in the world think this is the natural order. You plant seeds, they grow. But in every generation there is such a tzaddik who sees through the veil and understands that everything we have is really a function of Ratzon Hashem. Nothing would happen without the Ratzon Hashem. And everything is a Chanina, everything is a free gift. In the generation of Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa, that tzaddik's name happened to have been Chanina, by a lovely coincidence. That the tzaddik who is the Bechinas Chanina, his name was Chanina. But every generation is such a person. And that's what the Gemara says. Every day a basket comes out and says the whole world is nizayin in the schus of that Chanina. So he says that in the time of Chanukah, who were those people that recognized this? One was named Matisyahu. Matisyahu is Matas Yud Kei Vav, the gift of Yud Kei Vav. It's Matasyahu. And his father name was Yochanan. Yochanan is Yud Vav Chonan. Those are Oisius of the Shem. Right? Matas, the gift of Yud Kei Vav, and Yochanan Yud Vav Chonan. Grants. So these names aren't coincidental. These names are the names that express this quality of people who recognize that everything we have comes from the Ribono Shel Olam, and that's chus we're zeicha to nisim. But this is really what Chanuka is meant to achieve. Chanuka is meant to achieve this idea. A person can go through life with a mistake and think that the world runs on its own. There's a teva, there are laws of nature, there are natural patterns. From time to time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervenes. He wakes up, so to speak, and he steps in, he involves himself, and then he disengages and steps back, and the world continues following the natural way. So that's a mistake. As the Ramban says in Parshas Bo, the famous Ramban, that Menanisim Haniglim Hamuforsamim, from the revealed public miracles, Adam Maida Benisim Hanistarim. A person has to acknowledge the concealed miracles. That we have to understand. That these are not exceptions, these are the rules. Right? When something is removed from the general category, right? It doesn't come to reflect only upon itself. So if a person would think that everything follows a natural order, and all of a sudden there's an aberration and something is miraculous, it's not just that's an exception. It's to be malamed on the entire cloud, that everything really is, in a sense, a miracle. It's a manifestation of Ratzon Hashem. That's what the Chanuka story comes to bring out. And what we see from Tzaddik is that not everybody is going to understand this. It may be that will be very few people in the world who understand this. In that door of the Chanuka story, it was Matasyahu and Yochanan. These are the two people. And the entire world, so to speak, the entire Klal Yisrael was sustained by them. Those people who had this understanding. And that's really what the idea of a kayin is. Matasyahu and Yochanan were kehanim. The idea of a kayin is that the kayin, as the Chazal tell us, the Ayavus Abriyas Makarvan L'Torah, it's his job to bring everyone to the ideals of Torah, but he does that by being a role model. If he, in his own life, exemplifies the values of Torah, so that he has a good chance of being able to makar others and bring other people close. So therefore, the kayin has a higher standard. There's a higher requirement, a greater responsibility on his shoulders, because he has to be a true believer, because he has to be the one that brings everyone to the emes. Right? Talmid of Shalaron, Ayavus Abriyas Makarvan L'Torah. So in that door, that was the case. The Kehanim were the ones who excelled in this area. Matasyahu, Yochanan, they were the people that were able to see this, and accordingly, they were able to mazak the entire Klal Yisrael. Going back to that Gemara in Nedarim, the Gemara in Nedarim says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to be motzi kahuna from Shem, and Shem made this mistake, and he mentioned Avram before he mentioned the Ribono Shel Olam. So how do you explain that? Like, what was the basis of his mistake? So the Maral says an amazing thing. The Maral says that there are some people who recognize the Ribono Shel Olam only from the miraculous things that he does. And there are some people that understand that Ribono Shel Olam is Mukhrach HaMetzias, he exists as necessity, and they understand the Ribono Shel Olam himself without relying on evidence with things that he does. Says Shem, says the Maral, was a person who knew the Ribono Shel Olam through his pu'ulais. Meaning, when things followed the natural course, he didn't see the Ribono Shel Olam. When there was something exceptional, something miraculous, the Ribono Shel Olam was stepping in. So therefore, when he witnessed the tremendous miracles that were performed for Avraham Avinu, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin al Kuf Ches says, brings the pasuk in Yeshaya, that Avraham Avinu waged the war with dirt and straw. He threw dirt and straw at the enemies, and the dirt turned into arrows, and the straw turned into swords. It was totally miraculous. So when Shem heard about this, the Gemara says there in Kufches that Shem asked Eliezer, how did you wage the war? And he told him. So Shem was so impressed. From this I see that there's a God on the world. But it comes out that the hakara of Shem in the Ribono Shel Olam came from the experience of Avraham Avinu. And therefore, that's why he gave the bracha to Avraham Avinu, and only then did he give the bracha to the Ribono Shel Olam, because everything he knew about the Ribono Shel Olam came from what he had witnessed, what he had experienced in his own life as well, at Nabal. But this was the most recent. What have you done for me lately? This was the most recent. So therefore, he mentioned the Avram, and then he mentioned HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It says the Maral that a person who thinks that way makes a big mistake, because then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement in the world is only efshar. It's only something which is possible, but not something which is mukhrach. Because if you think of the world as running by itself, just from time to time HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervenes, so it's possible. It's possible he can intervene, it's possible he won't intervene. So you're in a sense expressing a belief in the Ribono Shel Olam as being involved in the world only in a contingent way. It's possible. Possible he will be involved, possible he won't be involved. But Avraham Avinu understood that the miracles are only reflections of a deeper reality, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly involved in an ongoing basis. And therefore, he doesn't place himself before the Ribono Shel Olam. He places the Ribono Shel Olam first and foremost. Because the Ribono Shel Olam is always involved. It's not only that he's involved in the miracles that I experience. Even in the natural course of events, he's always involved, and therefore it makes no sense to put HaKadosh Baruch Hu after Avraham Avinu. And that was the mistake that he corrected. So, therefore, says the Maral, this is why Kahuna was taken away from Shem and given to Avram. But Lefid Varenu, we understand deeply why that is. Because it isn't just that Avram was a bigger tzaddik than Shem, or Avram was a bigger chacham than Shem. This is the essence of what it means to be a Kayin. The essence of what it means to be a Kayin is to recognize this reality and to be mezaka the entire world, like Matasyahu and Yochanan. And therefore it isn't simply, the Gemara says, that Shem was less deserving, Avram was more deserving. This Hakara is part of the essence of what it means to be a Kayin. And therefore Shem lost the Kuna, it was given to Avram. I would like to conjecture that if you reflect a little bit on Hellenist philosophy, we understand that the position which Shem took, Yavan took even farther. In other words, to Shem, there's a world of Teva, in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu intervenes intermittently. In Hellenist philosophy, if you read up on Aristotle's conception of God, right, it's even less than that. The Ribono Shel Olam is entirely impersonal and uninvolved. He is the prime mover. He is the first cause. But there's no volition, there's no will, there's no response. If you want a kosher source for reading up on this, look in the first few pages of the Kuzari, where the Melech of the Kuzarim speaks to the philosopher, and the philosopher tells him that your dream, right, the Melech of the Kuzarim had a dream, right, that kavanascha ritzuya, that your intent is very, very fine, but your deeds are not. And this was a very disturbing dream. So it says he went to a Christian and to a Muslim. Ultimately, he went to a Chacham Chachmei Yisrael, and that's the premise which begins the entire Sefer. But he went to a philosopher, to a Aristotelian philosopher, and the philosopher told him the dream is baloney. He says, because it's not shaykh that God should say that your intention is worthy, your actions aren't worthy. God doesn't know your intention, He doesn't know your actions. Right? He's totally impersonal. He's the first cause of the universe, but He doesn't know, He doesn't observe, He isn't involved, He doesn't relate. He's totally separated from human experience. and therefore the whole dream makes no sense. And there's a long discussion over there. The philosopher lays down exactly what his philosophical beliefs are. That's really the position of Yavin. So the battle of Yavin and Yisrael at one level is really an ideology about the nature of God. They aren't atheists, in the purest sense. They don't say that Olam Kadmain, or that, well, maybe they do say that, but they don't say that the world has no cause. What they're saying, but there is no personal God. He's uninvolved, doesn't relate, doesn't respond, he doesn't guide the world. Yisrael, of course, takes the opposite position. So the position of Yavin is the position of Shem, just taken to a farther extreme. Shem said there's the world of Teva, but intermittently HaKadosh Baruch Hu does step in, but only from time to time. Yavin takes it a step further, that B'chlal is no divine involvement. But therefore, that's why the tension between Yavin and Yisrael is specifically between Yavin and Kehanim. Specifically Yavin and Kehanim. Because Kehanim are the ones who bear this message. Matasyahu, Yochanan, these are the ones whose job it is to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all things. And therefore, when Yavin attacks, they are Kama. They are the ones who rise up against Kehanim, and therefore, of course, it's Kehanim who respond to the challenge, and they fight back, and the victory is given to them. This is one idea, I think, that we see in the Chanuka story. The hour is late. I'll just mention one second idea, the Kitzur Nimros. In Chanuka, there's also tremendous emphasis on the idea of Mesiras Nefesh, the Mesiras Nefesh of the Chashmonaim. And there's a Gemara in Brachas, a famous Gemara in Brachas. The Gemara says that Rav Papa asked Abaye that why is it that in the earlier generations there were Nisim, later generations there are no Nisim. So Abaye answered back that Kamoi Masvi Nafshayu Dushas Hashem. In the earlier generations, people were Meiser Nefesh, were Kiddush Hashem. In later generations, people weren't Meiser Nefesh. The Gemara says, what's an example? The Gemara says, like the story of Rabbi Barava. Rabbi Barava once saw a woman in the street wearing a karbalta. A karbalta was a garment that was very, very not modest. So Rabbi Barava went and he tore it off her. And it turned out that she wasn't a Jewish woman. She was a Gentile woman. So she took him to court, and the court fined him 400 zuz. And it says, Masayin, Masayin, Dal Mea Zuzah Shavia. Patience, patience. I could have saved myself 400 zuz if it would have been more patient. So the question is that the Gemara brings this as an example of Mesiras Nefesh, which at first glance seems to be very, very strange, because in this instance it was a mistake, and he was punished for the mistake, and he himself recognized it was a mistake. Why is this the example of Mesiras Nefesh? The idea is as follows: that really, whenever we have to make a decision on a course of action, there are two forces that are at odds. There is the one force which is pushing me to action, and there's the other force which is pushing me to inaction. Now the question is like this. The question is that what should Mesiras Nefesh be? Many of us think like this, that our default position should be Shei Bal Tasa. Sit back, don't do anything rash. So then we should reason and think, is this a situation which justifies Mesiras Nefesh? Is this a situation which calls for strong action? And then if intellectually we determine, then we should then proceed. There's another way it could be. It could be that our default response is to act. When we see a Chilul Hashem, we see something, a desecration of God's name, it says we have to act. We can't, we're chomping at the bit to do something. Now obviously you have to look before you leap. So there's a counter force called restraint, patience. That you have to hold yourself back. But the idea is not that you're using your reason to animate action, you're using your reason to restrain action. In other words, by default, you would act. And you're using your reason to restrain yourself, and as soon as you've gone through the process of reasoning and you've determined there's no grounds for restraint, then you spring into action. Two different possibilities, two different ways. I think most of us ascribe to the first way. Most of us think, wait, let's not rush into things. Let's be cool, calm, collected, and let's analyze the issue and see, is there a reason here that we should do something rash? Right? Chazal is saying that's not really Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is the idea that you are so passionate about Kiddush Shem Shemayim that you have to exercise conscious restraint to hold yourself back. Now you should exercise that restraint, because if you plunge into things, you may commit mistakes. But that's really what a person has to feel. A person has to be on fire for Mesiras Nefesh. So, but he has to exercise restraint. So the Gemara wants to give an example of what the person's default position should be. So it picks an example of a person who plunged and did not exercise restraint. Not to say that that is the model we should follow. We have to exercise restraint. But the drive to Makad Hashem Shemayim should be so intense and so strong that we should be naturally inclined to jumping in and doing something, and we have to really hold ourselves back. Now, of course, there's a big nafka between the two. In other words, what would happen if you have a difficulty deciding? In other words, if you are the person who is by nature inert, and you need to come to a reasoned decision to be Moshe Nefesh, so if you can't come to a reasoned decision, you'll remain inert. On the other hand, if you'll be a person who is bold and determined and driven, so then if you can't find a good reason to exercise restraint, then there's no point of restraint, and you will jump into it. So that there could be practical consequences of these two opinions. But that's what Mesiras Nefesh has to be. Mesiras Nefesh has to be that there's an intolerance. I can't bear to witness an injustice. I can't bear to witness an evil. I can't bear to witness something which is improper. And I may have to hold myself back and exercise restraint in that way. But this is really what a person's feeling should be. In other words, the idea that we can sit back and just watch with serenity, terrible injustices being done, means that there's an insensitivity to evil which is not becoming to a Jew. Whereas a Jew can't be a person who is insensitive. I remember, it comes to mind, it's a very funny thing that years and years and years ago, in Yeshiva they made a film for a Purim spiel, right? And they had a fellow who was he had a Scottish accent, so he sounded very erudite, and he was giving a tour of the Yeshiva. And at the end, he was sitting in an armchair, smoking his pipe, very relaxed and serene. And the Bachrim behind him, as background, were carrying out a battle, hitting each other with baseball bats. And he's talking about how the Yeshiva exemplifies the values of Surah and Pumbedisa and so on and so forth. In other words, sometimes we are so serene and so relaxed and so calm when the whole world is falling apart. At a time that we should be driven to action, and nothing disturbs us. We're calm as a cucumber, and then we say, should we do something? Should we do something? Let's call a meeting for a month from now, and we'll discuss it, we'll debate it, we'll get other opinions. In other words, I'm not saying that a person should be impulsive, but a person should feel the urgency to act when the Shem Shemayim is being mischalel. And that's really what the Gemara wants to prove with the Rabbi Rabbi. It's not pshat in the Gemara. But this is the idea. The Mesiras Nefesh really means, the bottom line, that I put aside all my thoughts of self-preservation and self-interest. And I am motivated by what is right and what is the Kiddush Hashem. I want to share with you an amazing, amazing thing, but this story about Avraham Avinu. That Avraham Avinu, right after his encounter with Melchizedek, meets the king of Sodom, and he says to the king of Sodom, says, "Listen, tain li nefesh, just give me the prisoners back, and you can take all the money." So Avraham says, "No, I'm not going to take any of the money. Harimosi yodi l'kel elyon, I have raised my hands to Hashem." Right? He says, "Im michut v'tzroich now, not a string, not a shoe strap. I won't take anything of yours. I don't want that you should say that I made Avram rich. That's what the pasuk says. If you look at Rashi understands that Rabbi was saying two things. He was saying, first of all, I'm not going to take anything from the spoils of the war. Not a string, not a shoe strap. And secondly, if you want to give me money of your own, I won't take that. Because I don't want you to say you made Avram rich. So the Meir Shiloach understands that argument, Avram, only goes back on not taking money from the king of stone. But I'm not going to take money that you give me, because I don't want you to say that you made me rich. But that can't be the rationale behind not taking from the spoils. The spoils were Avram's. If you wage war and you take spoils of war, it belongs to you. So that wouldn't have been a gift from the king of stone. So he understands that pasuk below Saimar only goes on the last thing. In other words, if you're going to offer me money from your own pocket, that I won't take. I don't want you to say that you made me rich. But why not take the spoils of war? Those were rightfully Avram's. So the Meir Shiloach says an amazing thing. He says like this. He says, when a person has to make a big decision, it's very, very important that you eliminate all aspects of self-interest. Because if there's any negias, if there's any possibility of self-interest, that may cloud your decision. He says this decision to go to war to retrieve Lot was a very serious question. It was a toss-up. Because you think about it for a moment, what was going to come from Lot? The nations of Ammon and Moav, which were terribly wicked, terribly corrupt, so awful that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said about those nations that they can't come to Kal Hashem. But on the other hand, that only applies to the Scharim. The Nekevas, good things could come from them, and history bears that out. Rus Moavia and Namal HaAmonis came from the Nekevas. So really it was a very complex issue. Is this the right thing to do, or is this not the right thing to do? Does the bad that's going to come outweigh the good, or does the good outweigh the bad? So it's a very tough decision. So imagine you have to make a decision like that, and your judgment is clouded because there's the possibility I can make money from this. Right? I'm going to go to war. I'll take spoils. So I'll become rich. So that will tip the judgment in favor of going to war. Maybe the correct decision is not to go to war. So he says that whenever a person is faced with a major decision, a difficult decision, a person has to make sure that he removes all elements of self-interest, so that the only thing which he considers is what is Torah from Hashem. And that's what he says in the amazing pshat in the pasuk. Harimosi yadi al Hashem is not, as English says, I lift up my hand to Hashem now. Harimosi al Hashem means I lifted up. It's past tense. I lifted up my hands to Hashem, meaning before I went to war, I already had sworn that I would not take any of the spoils of war. Because I knew this would be a very, very serious decision, and therefore to make sure that I would decide only on the basis of determining what the Ratzon Hashem is, I took a precaution and I already swore that I would not take any of the spoils. So I knew that my judgment would be totally objective. What money you'd give me now? So that I don't want to take, because people say I made Avram rich. But the spoils of war, which were rightfully his, he said, I'm not going to take, because I already had decided that I would not take them. This is the idea that Ram said that when you make a decision, you have to be motivated ach v'rak l'shem shemayim. There can't be any self-interest. That really is the question of Kiddush Hashem. Because what is the question? Why is it that sometimes we are so passive? We are so passive and so not driven to be Moshe Nefesh. It's because we have our self-interest, our own finances, our own security, our own comfort, our own peace of mind. These things become very, very important to us, and therefore what is important in terms of Kiddush Hashem and Ratzon Hashem, that becomes secondary. So if we say, let's be careful, let's not jump into things, it's going to cost a lot of money, it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to be inconvenience, maybe even a little bit of embarrassment, so we'll do it, but only if we really think it through and we're certain that it's necessary. But otherwise, by default, we'll sit back. But a person who takes precautions and already removes all elements of self-interest, therefore he's only motivated and animated by the Ratzon Hashem, that will be a person who's ready to act. Because if he's only concerned about the Ratzon Hashem, if he has no self-interest, not his time, not his money, not his embarrassment, not his comfort, then he does. So that's Mesiras Nefesh. That's Mesiras Nefesh. And that is what Avraham Avinu demonstrated in this story, and therefore there's a remez here to this very important idea of Chanukah. It says in the Balei Musar that based on Akbar and Brachas, you see that Nisim come for Mesiras Nefesh. The Nisim of Chanukah came because of the Mesiras Nefesh of the Chashmonaim. Right? The key to Mesiras Nefesh is this meat of Avraham Avinu, is to remove all elements of self-interest and to be motivated ach v'rak by the Ratzon of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Everyone should have a Chanukah.